Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I hope you all had a great week. Today we're going to be diving into the historical parallels again, basically part 3, right? The third parallel here. Last time we kind of ended upon Jesus' crucifixion, right? These parallels were supposed to converge upon Christ's, first coming and then establish the kingdom then, right? But, we covered in Mission of the Messiah, especially in detail, that because of the faithlessness of the people, not because of Christ's failure, but the failure of the people, that is why Jesus was crucified. And we saw many evidences that suggest that, that was not the original desire of Jesus. And, all the prophets, the Old Testament, things like that. There's just so many lines of evidence that suggest so, right? And after this, God does not stop working after, Christ ascends, right? He still works throughout his church, just like he did when Christ was not on earth. He was still working through Christ's ancestors, right? Jesus' ancestors. And so too, after Jesus has ascended, Jesus said that, I'll give, basically the chosen body of Christ is the new Israel, right? The parable of talents, not talents, the tenants, really exemplifies that the chosen people is now the new body of Christ, right? The new Israel through the church age. So God does not stop working after Jesus ascends, and that's why the ensuing 2,000 years of Christian history is very important, right? God is still working through his chosen people. I just want to clarify just at the outset that I am not a New Testament church historian. I want to make that very clear, okay? I have a lot to learn, and I'm sure a historian can give a much better, wide picture regarding especially this section here of the New Testament age church. So I just want to really clarify that at the outset, okay? Yes. But with that being said, let's kind of go on. Yes. So the first period of the Christian era was the period of persecution in the Roman Empire. During these 400 years, there were about 10 periods of persecution, but, there were very severe ones, right? And within this entire period, yes, there were breaks. Some years there were peace, but other emperors came in, and therefore they really ranked up the persecution and the murder and things like that, throwing into the lion's den, the Colosseum, and tremendous persecution, basically, right? I believe it was a Roman historian named Tacitus that was saying that, Christians were being basically crucified and then being tar being poured upon them, and then their bodies being used as like candle lights for the Colosseum and things like that. It was terrible, right? It was terrible persecution throughout the Roman Empire, especially Diocletian persecution, just the guy like literally right before Constantine, right? It was really severe, right? They were all hunted down, and the leaders were basically executed and thrown into the Colosseum to fight lions and bears and things like that. It was really bad. And that was not the original route, obviously, that God wanted his people to walk, right? But because Christ was crucified, they cannot set up the physical kingdom of God. The chosen Christians were not supposed to be persecuted. That was not the original desire of God, right? That was not the original route. Similarly, the previous chosen people, the Jewish nation as a whole, they were not supposed to be destroyed in AD 70, right? It was only because of their faithlessness that Jesus pronounced a curse over them, right? Being fulfilled in the ensuing 2,000 years, but most significantly in the AD 70 with the destruction of Jerusalem. Yes. So the 400 years of persecution paralleled the slavery in Egypt that the Jewish people faced, right? So its purpose was to restore that earlier period through parallel indemnity conditions. By enduring great suffering, Christians were restoring through indemnity the 400 period of preparation for the advent of the Messiah. Sorry, this mouse is, okay, there we go. Which have been defiled due to the Jewish people's mistake in rejecting Jesus, which resulted in him going to the cross, right? During the period of Roman persecution, Jesus' 12 disciples and 70 apostles, or 72, it should be 12 apostles and then 70 disciples, yes. Or 72 if you look at different gospels. But were the first of many generations of Christians who suffered severe persecution in the Roman Empire over a period of 400 years, right? So this parallels Jacob's course of 12 sons and the 70 or 72 kinsmen. And then Jesus has the same thing where he has 12 apostles and then 70 or 72 disciples. Yes. Toward the end of the period of persecution in the Roman Empire, Jesus increased the numbers of believers by moving their hearts with his power and grace. So this is the narrative that Constantine, I think it's Milvian Bridge, right? The battle at Milvian Bridge. He sees the cross, right, up on in the sky and says, like, in this name conquer. And he paints the cross on everyone's shield in his entire army. And after that victory, Constantine does not make Christianity the state religion, but he recognizes Christianity. He basically ends the persecution to every religion. But, Christians were the severely persecuted religion. So basically, he did not, make it a state religion or the official religion of the Roman Empire, but he basically ended the persecution there. In especially the Western side. Still in the Eastern Christianity, Eastern Roman Empire, right? Because it was divided into two, right? And then there's, I believe, 2 emperors for each side, right? And Constantine basically ended persecution on the Western side. But in the East, there was still persecution. Yes. And then, so God led Constantine to recognize Christianity. And Theodosius, he made it the state religion, which, you can debate if that's good or not. He made it the official religion in the 380, but in 392, he issued the Theodosian decrees, which banned pagan practices and officially made Christianity the sole state religion of the Roman Empire. Right? So that was the only religion you could have. So I don't know, we can debate if that's good or not, but yes. But definitely the 380 official faith, the empire's official faith, I think that's good, right? 392, we don't know. And there's debates about that, but let's go on. But at the end of this period, St. Augustine arose as the great spiritual leader who helped to bring Christianity to a pagan Roman Empire. So especially the West, right? St. Augustine is very influential in the Western traditions, like Catholicism and Protestantism comes out of Catholicism. So the Western traditions are heavily affected by Augustine. Doctrine of original sin or predestination or things like that comes from Augustine, right? So he's very influential in the West. Yes, there is like Orthodox in the East, but it's very minor, right? It's very minor. And basically the providence goes on to the Western Christianity. Right? Yes, Christians thus restored Canaan spiritually inside the Roman Empire, the satanic world. Right? So the Israelites, after suffering 400 years of slavery, Moses led them out of Egypt. I know it's God, but he used Moses, right? Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt into the promised land. Similarly, Christians, or the body of Christ, the New Testament age Christianity, restored Canaan spiritually. Right? And that brings us to the period of the church patriarchs, where the Christianity is not really being persecuted anymore, right? Because it is the state religion, basically, right? There is no other religion you can basically hold to So it's not really being persecuted. I think you can imagine why. Yeah. But the 400-year period of regional church leadership lasted from the time roughly of St. Augustine until the enthronement of Charlemagne in 800 AD. And you can really see the parallels kind of forming, culminating to, I think you can see what it is, right? You can imagine what it is. Yes. In the New Testament age, the period of regional church leadership was set up to restore the period of the judges through parallel indemnity conditions. In this period, regional church leaders, patriarchs, bishops, abbots, led Christian society. So regional leaders, similar to the judges, led Christians. Like the judges of the Old Testament age, the regional church leaders had duties similar to those of the prophet, priest, and king. Christian society in this period was a feudalistic society under those local authorities, similar to the judges, right? Just after the Israelites landed in the Promised Land, they had the system of the judges. This is where you get like people like Samson and these other people who are basically, or Gideon and these other people, where they're basically serving as the regional leaders, basically, like clan leaders. You think you kind of think of it like that. But they serve the office of prophet, priest, and king, or leader of the Jewish people, and similarly with New Testament age Christianity. So Christian society in this period was a feudalistic society under these local authorities. Yes. And then the 120-year period of the Christian Empire until Henry I was elected king of the German lands in 19 AD was to restore the 120-year period of the United Kingdom of Israel through parallel indemnity conditions. In the period of the Christian Empire, the missions of the regional church leaders were apportioned to the offices of monastic leaders corresponding to the prophets, the pope, similar to the high priest, and the emperor who ruled the people. They were responsible to guide the second Israel, which is Christianity, to accomplish the goal of the providence of restoration. So you can really see the parallel there, right? In this stage, it was King Saul or King David and King Solomon, the priest and the prophet Nathan, or other people, right? Priests, obviously, the sons of Aaron, and you can really see this parallel kind of forming here. And Pope Leo III crowned Charlemagne and blessed him as the first emperor of Christendom, the second Israel in 800 AD. So, similarly, Prophet Samuel anointed King Saul, right? He poured the oil over King Saul's head and therefore declared him as the king, right? And originally, God wanted to establish Saul's lineage across Israel forever, right? That was his original intention, right? But because Saul had fallen away, because he had left God's covenant, that is why God chose a new king, David, right? And similarly with Solomon, he was initially faithful, but later on, as he left God's covenant, that's when the divided kingdom period struck, right? Rehoboam and Jeroboam, they split the kingdom with Israel in the north, right? The 10 tribes, and then Judah with, I think, Benjamin in the south, right? So it parallels this period as well. Wrong button. Okay, yes. And this was the empire at the time of Charlemagne, right? It was massive across the, entire European peninsula. And this is not the entire, influence of Western Christianity, because there's Eastern Christianity as well. This is just the Western empire, right? But Charlemagne's coronation was not just a minor event. It was not just some random dude, right? It was huge for Christianity as a whole, because this now symbolized the entire Christian West, right? it united Western Christendom, which was basically, it was very tribal in different regions, just like the period of the Judges. But at the time of Charlemagne, it unified the entire Christian areas, right? And it basically established the legitimacy of the Pope, because the Pope crowned Charlemagne, right? Because the Pope crowned Charlemagne, up until then, the Pope didn't really play a role in that a sphere. But once he, crowns Charlemagne, therefore the emperor also had a duty to the Pope, and the Pope had a duty to the emperor, right? So the emperor also protected the church from this point on, right? And thereby it protects the entire Christianity as a whole, the emperor. Yes. So it was huge at this point. There's much bigger empires later on, right, for like America or like the Mongol Empire. But at this time, it was massive, right? It was huge. Yes. Okay. And in the period of the Christian Empire, the emperors did not remain obedient to God's will and left the position of Abel for the substantial offering. Hence, neither the foundation of substance nor the foundation for the second coming of Christ was established. Right? Charlemagne was doing really good, but then his sons, right, or his grandsons, especially his grandsons, they fought amongst each other. They had three different rulers, right? So there was constant infighting, and then that's what led to the divided kingdom of what was this, right? Apparently they split it up into like 3 sections like this, right? And yeah, it didn't end well, right? Charlemagne stood upon the foundation of the 400-year period of regional church leadership, which restored through indemnity in the form of substantial parallels the 400-year period of the Judges. Therefore, like King Saul, he stood upon the foundation of a dispensation of 40 for the separation of Satan. By faithfully living according to the teachings of Jesus in his work to realize the Christian ideal of the state, he was to establish the foundation of faith. And Charlemagne himself, he did that. He definitely did that. He was successful. Had the second Israel absolutely believed in and followed Charlemagne, the foundation of substance would have been laid, and thereby the foundation for the Messiah would have been established. So this is why DP says that the Messiah could have come in Charlemagne's time, right? I didn't know that until until I actually saw it in the DP, but that's what it says, right? That paralleling the kings of the Old Testament, Saul, David, and Solomon, and the Messiah should have come here, right, in Solomon's day when Israel was the superpower of the region, not only militarily, economically, politically, right, obviously religiously. And Charlemagne, if, he was a great ruler in and of himself, right, but his sons, and especially his grandsons, were not good. They were not good. And they basically divided the empire. Therefore, although the foundation of faith was laid, the foundation of unity with his sons, right? As you recall, the sons have to inherit that foundation of faith, right? Charlemagne lays the foundation of faith, and just like in Ham's day, right? Noah laid the foundation of faith, but because Ham could not inherit that foundation of faith and unite with his brother, that is why the providence could not be accomplished in that day. That's why the Messiah could not come in his day, right? So too, Charlemagne's day, he established the foundation of faith, but his sons have to inherit that and then unite with their brothers, right? They can't just, play around until the empire collapses. Literally, that's literally what they did. But they have to inherit that and then unite with the brothers, thereby establishing the foundation for the Messiah. Yes. But because of their lack of unity, the period of the divided kingdoms of East and West ensued. The 400-year period of the divided kingdoms of East and West began with the division of the Christian Empire in 919 AD and ended in 1309 AD with the papacy moving to Avignon. I think that's how you say it. right? Avignon, yes. Yeah, we need Mr. Pascal. But I think that's how you say, yeah. In what is now southern France. Its purpose was to restore the 400-year period of the divided kingdoms of North and South, Israel and Judah, through parallel indemnity conditions. So just like the United Kingdom, Judah and Israel split, right? I think it was Jeroboam in Israel, Rehoboam, I believe, yeah, I believe that is right, yes. Rehoboam is Solomon's son, yes, right, yes, okay, yes. And then basically the top-level commander rebelled against Solomon's son, right? And then that's why it split, right? The top-level commander was Jeroboam, and they split the United Kingdom. Yes. And then the divided kingdoms, Christian empire, split between the Eastern Franks and then the Western Franks. After bitter and constant conflict among Charlemagne's descendants, the Christian empire also began to divide in the third generation into the East Franks and the West Franks. The East Franks stood in the evil position toward the West Franks, who were in the Cain position. And during the parallel period of the divided kingdoms of East and West, the papacy became corrupt. Right? God sent prominent monks to promote internal reform in the church, like monks or Thomas Aquinas or these other people who were very significant, who were trying to reform the church through their various means. Right? Since the papacy and the church did not repent, God chastised them externally by letting their people fight the Muslims through the Crusades. Right? So I believe DP especially says like Islam was used as a hammer against the corrupt Christian church, right? Because it was increasingly becoming corrupt, right? And that's not even doubted by the Catholic scholars, right? It was objectively it was becoming corrupt through that. But because of their constant fighting with the Islam, and they suffered heavy losses, right? The first crusade was initially successful. They captured Jerusalem, but, you know, I think it was Saladin, right? He basically, regained control of Jerusalem. And, the ensuing, other crusades that followed ended in disasters, right? Especially the Fourth Crusade. I don't know, like, people don't know how it happened, but the Fourth Crusade, basically the Eastern Christianity was asking help from the Western Christianity, right? Because in 1054 they split because of doctrinal matters or even political matters. So the Eastern Christianity, that's Orthodox, right? Byzantine Empire. And then the Western Christianity is, Catholicism, not Protestantism yet, right? Because it didn't start yet. But they split, right? And the Byzantines were basically asking for help from the Western Christianity. Help us because the Muslims are literally invading all our lands, right? They were going through Turkey and all of these different Byzantine lands, right? That were formerly Christian. Even Jerusalem was formerly Christian, right? Yes, it was really bad. So they called the East for the West for help. But then when the West got there, the West attacked the East Christians, right? And then that's when, the sacking of Constantinople and eventually the downfall of Constantinople, which was the Byzantine Empire's capital, right? That was their main city. But because of the fighting of Western Christianity and Eastern Christianity, Eastern Christianity basically crumbled, right? I don't know how it happened. And, there's many back and forth between scholars on what exactly was the reason. But, basically, Western Christianity sacked Constantinople, and it weakened it. Therefore, the Muslims could come however many decades later and then completely wipe out majority of the Byzantine Empire, right? So the Eastern Christianity. But anyways, so external chastisement, the Crusades. Through the Crusades, I think there were 8 total Crusades. There's many debated. Some people say 11 or some people say 8. But majority say 8, right? I believe so, 7 or 8. But through that, they suffered loss after loss after loss after loss over a period of like 200 years, right? With exception to the First Crusade. And because of that, the papacy basically lost a lot of legitimacy because they were the ones kind of funding and inspiring people to go, recapture the Holy Land, right? And fight the Muslim horde. Yes, Islam historically, there's no doubt about it that it spreads by the sword, right? From the very beginning of the founder, Muhammad, right? He took over Mecca with the sword, right? There's no doubt about it. No historical scholar disputes that, right? It's just objectively true. And the Muslim hordes were basically taking over the entire Christian empire, right? They were going up into Iberia too, to Spain, right? And all around Turkey, capturing Jerusalem, obviously. And it was bad. It was bad, right? So the Crusades were also a response to that. So in some way, yes, it was righteous, right? But as every historical, conflict shows, nothing is black and white, right? Nothing is black and white. Oh, this side is evil and that side is good. There's nothing like that, right? Especially in historical, misunderstandings and infighting. It's always a gray area. It's never black and white, right? Yes, but because of the corruption of the papacy, God tried to send monks and different, priests and people like that to try to internally reform the papacy. Not only the papacy, but just Catholicism and the entire nation as a whole. And brought external chastisement through the Crusades. That paralleled through the straying Israelites, which the prophets, after the divided kingdoms, that's when the bulk of the prophets come out, right? So that's where Jonah, that's where Elijah, that's where Isaiah, that's where Jeremiah, all come about, right? So God is trying to send his prophets to internally reform the divided nations, right? When that ultimately they do not listen, right? The cries of the prophets, God sends Persia or Babylon in the both sides, right? Israel and Judah, to basically bring external chastisement, just like he did with the Crusades, with Islam, right? So God used the Gentile nations to bring the hammer upon the unrepentant people, right? Yes. Likewise, at the close of the period of the divided kingdoms of East and West, the papacy had completely lost its prestige and credibility after the repeated defeats of the Crusades, right? Christianity thus lost its center of spiritual sovereignty. Moreover, since the lords and knights were decimated by the Crusades, the papacy and the feudal lords had spent enormous funds to pursue these unsuccessful wars, and they were left impoverished. And therefore, monarchic Christianity began to erode. It's just like how both kingdoms collapsed in Israel and Judah. And this is where it leads into the period of the papal exile and return. The 210-year period of papal exile and return began in 1309 AD, when Pope Clement V was forced to move the papacy from Rome to Avignon, and ended with the Protestant Reformation in 1517. Its purpose was to restore the 210-year period of Israel's exile and return through parallel indemnity conditions. Just as the Jewish people were taken captive in Babylon, God allowed the popes to be taken into exile and suffer captivity in Avignon for 70 years, beginning in 1309. So this parallels that, right? They were initially taken into Babylon, and eventually the king of Babylon, King Cyrus, yes, he basically led, or was it King Darius? One of them, right? He began the three-step process for the exiles to return back to Israel, right? That's Cyrus, yes. to return back to Israel. The first wave was the 7 years. The next wave, like 100 couple years later, and then the third wave, just very close to the second wave. But the wave of return began after around 70 years. Similarly, the papacy was moved to Avignon, and after 70 years, it moved back into Rome, right? Because Avignon is in France. Apparently, the Roman Empire was not, or the Italy as a whole was not doing very well, and that's why the papacy moved to France, where basically it was protected, right? And later they moved back down. Yes. Oh, and this is actually called the Babylonian exile of the papacy, right? So people, like historians, actually call this narrative the Babylonian captivity of the papacy. So it parallels, they see a direct parallel of this, right? So, excuse me, but historians are seeing a parallel of, what happened with the Jewish nation and what happened to the papacy in the Christian body of Christ, right? Yes. After the Pope returned to Rome, there was a period of approximately 140 years in restoration of papal authority in the Roman Church, up to the eve of the Protestant Reformation, spearheaded by Martin Luther in 1517. And this is where we see the last parallel forming. The 400-year period of preparation of the second advent of the Messiah began in 1517 with Martin Luther and the Protestant Reformation, and lasted until the eve of the second advent of Christ on the earth. Its purpose was to restore the 400-year period of preparation for the advent of the Messiah through parallel indemnity conditions. After the papacy returned to Rome, Christianity was to meet Christ at his second advent only after passing through the 400 years of preparation for the second advent of the Messiah. Medieval Christians established the foundation of faith by seeking to reform the Roman Church. These efforts culminated in the Protestant Reformation, led by Martin Luther. This movement pierced the spiritual darkness of medieval Europe with the light of the gospel and pioneered new paths of faith. Right? So it's led by Martin Luther, but there's other, prominent figures that help in the Reformation, right? Like Calvin or Zwingli, like other people that help this entire Reformation that is taking place. It leads to new paths of faith being formed. Foundation of faith is restored, similarly to the Israelites rebuilding the temple, which is the center of their civilization, right? The Israelite temple is not just a random building, right? It's a temple that is supposed to symbolize the entire nation, right? Not only religiously, but also politically and ceremoniously, and these different aspects like that. Right? So it was huge, the temple. Reforming faith through the law with Ezra, foundation of faith being restored there. In the period of preparation for the second advent of the Messiah, beginning with the Renaissance, progress in virtually every field of human endeavor, including politics, economy, culture, and science, increased at a rapid rate, creating the global environment conducive to the work of Christ at his second advent. So in the preparation for the advent of the Messiah in his first coming, Malachi called the Israelites for repentance, but also God was preparing these different religions, right? Buddha, Socrates, Confucius, Zoroaster, who else? Hinduism. I guess Hinduism doesn't really have a central figure, but just Hinduism. And that's not saying they're all true, equally true, right? Christianity is, the center of God's providence, right? But God can use these other religions to bring them to the location of salvation, right? So for example, God used the Zoroastrian three wise men, right? They were not saved through their own religion, right? Zoroastrianism, right? But God led them through their religion to see the star, and that was a symbol apparently in their religion, like a great king is going to be born. So they followed the star, and through their religion, God could bring them to the location of salvation, right? Which is the feet of Christ, right? So that must be really clear, right? So these different religions, yes, God can use them, right? It's not only Christianity that God can work in, right? God is using these different religions, and Islam is definitely included in here too, right? Buddhism, Greek philosophy, Confucianism. Confucianism is not really a religion, right? It's more like philosophies or way of life, state structure, and things like that. Similar with Socrates, right? It's not really a religion. It's like different philosophies and thinking, right? Obviously, Buddhism is, Hinduism, Zoroastrianism. But God is using these world religions, preparing them so that they have a foundation, right? A similar foundation, so that ultimately they can receive Jesus, right? Yes. So that must be really clear. But similarly, internal preparations, the world religions are to be united within the Christian civilization as a whole, right? So this is why Protestant Reformation, there were a lot of new groups springing up, right? Even those so-called heretics, branded by, mainstream Christianity, right? Like Mormonism or like Seventh-day Adventism or Jehovah's Witnesses, right? God can use these different people, right, to ultimately prepare a foundation so that they can receive the Messiah, right? God is not striving for every jot and tittle of doctrinal purity, right? It's more the fruits of the Christian faith, right? Doctrine is important. Yes, it's very important, right? Especially like major shifts, right? Like major shifts. Doctrine is important, but the fruits of Christianity, like Mormon, objectively speaking, Mormonism produces better fruits than traditional Christianity, right? I think you can see that, especially within the family structure, right? That's undeniable. And the divorce rate is very low, right? They are maintaining Mormon, culture and things like that. Tim Ballard, he's the pedophile hunter, right? He went to some South American country, right, or something like that. I don't know.
Saved 7,000 women and children.
Okay, I see. Yeah, and Tim Ballard, there's many other Mormons, right? Even in TPUSA, there's prominent Mormons. Who's that? Several senators are also Mormon. So Mormonism is increasingly being, it's funny because as long as you become bigger, right, they eventually let you in, right? It's like, because, people are recently saying, prominent Christian YouTubers are saying that basically Mormons shouldn't be branded as heretics anymore, right? It's like, it just reveals that, and traditionally, Catholicism saw Protestantism and Eastern Orthodox as heretics. They are destined to hell, right? The church is the only mediator to salvation, to Christ, right? And Eastern Orthodox thought the same thing about Catholicism and Protestantism. And Protestantism thought the same thing about Catholicism and Mormon Orthodox, right? Eastern Orthodox, right? So it just reveals that it's not purely religious, right, in their motivation. There's definitely aspects of that. I'm not saying there's no aspect of that, but it kind of reveals that as, society kind of progresses, yes, I think you know what I'm trying to say. Yes, I think you know what I'm trying to say, especially with like Mormonism kind of not being really labeled as heretics anymore. Well, it's shifting, right? It's not. They're still branded as quote-unquote heretics, but it's shifting definitely. I think, you get what I'm saying, right? Even in True Father's Day, God led these different religions to bring them to the blessing, right? The location of salvation, right? The feet of Christ, right? So God can use these other religions to bring them to the location of salvation. Like that's. So it's not only Christianity that God can work in, or only the religious sphere that God can work in. God can work in the technological sphere, or the obviously the religious sphere, but philosophical sphere, economic sphere, political sphere, all these different spheres of influence. God can work in them to ultimately provide the foundation for the Messiah. Right? That is the goal. And this is what God was preparing through the internal preparation of these world religions of the first coming and the world religions to be united within the Christian civilization. Sorry. Yes. Yes, we read that. Okay. In the present era of the Second Advent, the democratic political sphere has expanded throughout the world, allowing for the freedom of speech and religion. The rapid progress of transportation and communication and the extensive contact among languages and cultures have brought the world much closer together. These factors have fully prepared an environment in which the teachings of the returning Christ can be freely and swiftly conveyed to the hearts of all humankind. God has prepared everything so that the news of the second coming and the truth that is revealed can spread quickly throughout the world. So similarly, with the external preparation that happened through the Roman Empire, right, transportation, safe roads, different systems to guarantee that everyone's speaking the same language, everyone's using the same currency, and these different other factors, right? Hellenistic civilization, they're basically united upon one loosely defined culture and civilization. Right? Similarly, in the external preparation for the second advent of the Messiah, global democratic political sphere, progress of transportation and communication. I mean, internet is incredible, right? AI and things like that. And through the Renaissance, there is a large culture, right, that forms, not only politically, but also economically, scientifically, based upon the Renaissance and Protestant Reformation and things like that. Yes, so there's external preparation and internal preparation to prepare the foundation for the second advent of the Messiah. Yes. By examining the three historical parallels of parallel periods of indemnity, we can clearly see that God's providence is not an unconnected series of random occurrences, but rather an orderly development of events based upon the principles of restoration. The final preparation period for the second advent of Christ began around the time of Martin Luther's proclamation in 1517, which launched the Protestant Reformation. If we add 400 years to the year 1517, that brings us to the year 1917. If we add up the providential time periods beginning with the 400 years of persecution in Rome, all the way through the last 400 years of preparation for the second advent, so if we add up these numbers, right, that brings us to the year 1930. The conclusion is that the second coming of Christ must have come between 1917 and 1930. And I just want to clarify that this is not really set in the DP, right? This framework of 1917 to 1930. But, I think it's pretty well established. Like many lecturers have, stated this. Yes, I just wanted to clarify that. So why hasn't most of the world, including devout Christians, heard about this most important historic and providential event? In the final presentation, we will look more deeply into the second coming of Christ so that we may clarify the meaning of Christ's return and what we as God's children should be expecting. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the parallels, exciting. It really sets up a really good foundation for the second coming, talking about the second coming of Christ, right? And yeah, hopefully I can finish the second coming of Christ before I go to Taiwan. I'll try to work through it as fast as I can. But yes, it's only 18 actually. It's only 10:18. I guess question. Oh yeah, okay. Yes, questions. Yes, yes. Oh yes. Oh, I turned it off. Sorry.
Hello. Okay. I guess in regards to like the parallels of the time periods, and I'm hoping this makes sense, but actually, can you go back to the, so like how these are different than these, but these are like the same. Is it basically like contingent on people's portion of responsibility and repentance? Like if people were very repentant and like in this time period, then it would have been shortened.
I see.
Like is that, or was it that the providential time period was the important thing to fulfill? Like it had to be 400 years.
Well, I think we kind of discussed that last time, right? It's kind of dual prophecy, right? The condition of roughly 400 years has to be fulfilled, right?
Yeah.
But just like slavery in Egypt, originally it was supposed to be fulfilled in 390 years, right? But because of the failure of the people to accept Moses when he, killed the Egyptian and basically was trying to unite the Israel, right? Because of their failure to unite with Moses, Moses had to go 40 years into the wilderness, right? So therefore, an extension occurred, right?
Yeah.
Does that kind of help?
I think so.
Okay, I think it's kind of dual prophecy, right? God sends these people to try to, unite with the people, right? God sends these central figures to unite with the people, but if these central figures are not accepted, then it's kind of extended a little bit, but it doesn't have to be like 400 years exactly, right? Because it was supposed to be 390. This is like 1656. And other examples, right?
I guess,
yes.
Did it have to be around 400 years? Or could it have been, say, 40 years?
Oh, I see.
You know what I mean?
I see. I don't think so, because the whole purpose is to restore through indemnity the previous parallel, right? So it can't have been 200 years or 40 years or something.
Okay.
Maybe it could have been 40, but it's I'm not really sure where I stand on that, actually.
Okay.
I have to think more about that. Yes, but I think it's mainly located in the dual prophecy, just like in this example, right? The people can choose to obey or not to obey.
Okay.
Yes.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hopefully, yes. Thank you. Yes, thank you for your question.
I just had a quick comment about the Book of Mormon, because you're saying God works through all these different religions, but I remember just reading the introduction. It said, I'm going to paraphrase it, this book holds true until the time of the second coming. So I read that, I was like, oh, well then I'm good. I don't have to be a Mormon.
I see. I see, yeah. I didn't know it said that. Okay. And it kind of also says the Messiah will come to America, right? If I'm getting that correct. I believe so.
I think they said Jesus did come to America. I guess spiritually, physically, I'm not sure. After the crucifixion happened, I'm not sure.
Yeah, they say, this is, they say that, Jesus appeared to the Native American tribes, which were, they say, the Native American tribes, they say, are Jewish people that crossed the Bering Strait and came into the America, right? So they say that, the Native Americans have some Jewish lineage, which that's not true.
Yeah,
that's kind of the problem.
True Father said the Native Americans were like his cousins, like they were back in the day. I don't know, Mongolian originally or something.
Oh, I don't know.
I remember True Father saying the Native Americans are like his cousins. Yeah.
Okay.
But the story of Joseph Smith, like how True Father met Jesus when he was 15, praying all night on the mountain the Easter morning, it's the same story 100 years prior. Joseph Smith was 15, he was praying all night. Easter morning, Jesus came to him and said, please prepare the true church for the time of the second coming. Okay.
I'm not really sure about that, because there's also debates on whether, I didn't know about the age, but there's also debates where the original manuscripts are saying God the Father and God the Son appeared to Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith is not the Messiah, right? There is debates about that. That's what I know for sure. I didn't know that he met at 15. I kind of have to research that. But yeah. There are valid criticisms to the Mormon religion, obviously, but God is not striving for doctrinal complete purity, right? He can use other methods to establish a foundation for the Messiah, right? And I think that's what you can really see with the Mormon Church, right? Because apparently it was really close with the Mormons kind of accepting True Father. I need to know more details about that, because I've asked some people, and they kind of said it roughly. I need some names and historical articles or something along those lines, exactly who, right? So there's kind of that floating around, but we're not really sure who. I'm sure a Unification Church historian or somebody could provide examples, but we're not really sure. But apparently it was really close to kind of receiving true Father as the Messiah.
Yeah, I heard that too, that at one point the entire Mormon church almost accepted True Father.
Yeah, and that would be incredible, right? That would be amazing. Yeah, but we really need to get the names, historical events, dates, and there are eyewitnesses, saying that they invited 2 apostles, right? There's people, especially in the East Garden security team, that have said that, but we need to know exactly who came, right? Exactly who it was, right? What was their connection with the UC, right? And all these different things if we're going to establish it. If we're going to establish any historical credibility, right? Just sounds like a claim out there, right? And we need to actually support that with, yeah.
Like
yes.
how we brought sushi to America.
No, that's well established, actually. That's actually well established. No, it's that we bring our sushi to it. That's actually well established. Like, that's not even a joke.
I thought it was a rumor for so long. I was like, yeah, right, we did that.
Yeah, sushi to her. Well,
We did.
not bringing it over, but making it pretty mainstream, right? That's definitely Unification Church had a heavy influence in doing that, for sure. I mean, that's undeniable. But the Mormon Church thing, we need.
New York Times had an article about that.
Oh yeah. The King was referencing that some time ago, right? Yeah, but we need more details upon the Mormon thing, because if it's true, it's a huge bridge that we can make with the Mormon Church, right? So we need to kind of get the historical reliability as straight as possible, right? Yeah, they're the Mormon Church. Yeah, they're doing great. I mean, yeah. Anyways, but yeah, God is not striving for complete doctrinal purity, right? He's just striving to prepare a foundation so that they can meet the Messiah, right? And Joseph Smith was expecting for the Messiah to come to America, right? That's exactly what he did. But yeah, maybe because of different Korean leaders or other people that they cannot, unite with True Father. Yes. That's all I'm going to say about that. Yes. Thank you for your question. It is 26. I can kind of share an interesting question that I had regarding the spiritual and physical resurrection. It's something. Yes. Okay. Yes. I don't know if I'm going to preach, but I'm just going to share. Yes. I'm not preaching yet. But we'll see. But the spiritual and physical resurrection, this was one of my huge questions, because this was the question that, resurrection of the dead in Christian circles, right? We say a spiritual resurrection and they say a physical resurrection. Well, largely, right? There's many, again, Christianity is not a monolithic doctrinal, group, right? There's many different, aspects and belief systems of Christianity, especially, and also in regard to physical and spiritual resurrection. Regarding Jesus. But I think, first of all, I was really thinking about this and praying about this. First, I think we need to get our definition straight. What we mean by physical resurrection, what Christians mean by physical resurrection, and what we mean by spiritual resurrection. We need to first understand that, right? What are we saying? What are we saying and what are they saying, right? And second of all, I think we can really just answer this really fast with the mission of the Messiah. That's what I think that's what God led me to kind of figure out, right? Mission of the Messiah can solve this instantly if we understand what they're saying about physical resurrection, right? And I know I'm bringing up the mission of the Messiah again. I kind of bring it up like every single presentation. But yeah, the physical and spiritual resurrection, what New Testament age Christianity means by physical resurrection is not, first of all, it's very clear, it's not resuscitation, okay? Resuscitation is like Lazarus rising, right? Jesus rising Lazarus, or Elijah, rising people from the dead, right? Or Jesus, another example of Jesus, the little girl, right, that was dead, and then Jesus rises her, right? But later on, she dies, Lazarus dies later on, right? So that's resuscitation. That is different from the Christian concept of physical resurrection. What they mean by physical resurrection is not resuscitation, okay? It's not resuscitation. What they mean by physical resurrection is a glorified body, right? The resurrection body It's a resurrection body that all believers will inherit in the last days, right? So they cite quotes like Paul, 1 Corinthians, saying that, this body is perishable, but in the latter days, I'm very loosely paraphrasing, it'll be imperishable, undefiled, eternal, and things like that. In 1 Corinthians 15, excuse me. Oh, man, I think I'm starting to get a cold. I don't know. And they also reference verses like Jesus being the first fruits of the resurrection, right? So he is the first fruits of the resurrection body that all believers will inherit. That's where you get the notion of, when Christ returns, all believers will come out of their graves, and then, sheep's on the one side and goats on the other side, everlasting life and everlasting torment, right? That's where you get the notion of everyone will basically come out of their graves, right? Excuse me. So that is what they mean by physical resurrection. It is not resuscitation, right? They mean a resurrection body, a glorified body that all believers will inherit in the last days, right? That's what they mean by physical resurrection, okay? And what we mean by spiritual resurrection is not like a ghost or something that you can pass through, right? Or a spirit or something like that, right? I think we all understand this. But when we say spiritual resurrection to a New Testament Christian, right, they get the understanding like, oh, we can't really touch, right? It's, spirits are largely like we can pass through them, right? The spirit world is not tangible, but Jesus clearly was tangible, so he's definitely physical, right? But also they don't understand what they mean by physical resurrection as well. Majority of Christianity, right? It's not resuscitation. That's not their doctrine, right? It's physical resurrection is the glorified body that all believers will inherit in the last days. That's what they mean when they say physical resurrection. But when we say spiritual resurrection, we're not saying some ghost or something like that. And obviously, we all know. But what they hear is that, it's intangible and things like that. But New Testament clearly contradicts that, so you guys might be heretics or something. But we see in the spiritual realm, right, in the Old and New Testament, the spirit world is interacting with physical things, right? In Sodom and Gomorrah, the angels are sitting down with Lot, and they're having the bread or whatever, and the men of Sodom come and then try to, get them, right? Other examples like Jacob wrestling the angel, right? That's another example. There's many more in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament, in Acts, Peter and John is imprisoned, and the guards are there, the gates are shut, the door is locked. But then the two angels, or however many angels, come and then loose the chains, right? And they are able to walk out freely. So we see angels, the spiritual world, right? That's the spiritual world, right? Angels are purely spiritual, but they are able to interact with humanity multiple times, not only in the Old Testament, but also in the New Testament, right? So we see spiritual beings being able to interact with physical things, right? Especially in terms of, when God's providence allows it, right? Not all the time, obviously, or we bumping into angels and stuff like that. But when God's providence allows it, especially, obviously, with Jesus, right? He is the Lord of the spiritual realm, right? So he can definitely interact with physical things, right? So that's what we mean by spiritual resurrection. It's not just some ghost, and we all know, but, when they hear spiritual resurrection, that's what they think, right? But how you really solve this, really quickly, I think. Oh, did you want to say something?
Oh, no, I'm finished. Now I have questions.
Okay, yes. We are kind of running out of time, but yes. But I think a really just fast way to solve this, like, because we need to come up with fast responses and debates and stuff like that, discussions and things like that, right? So really fast way to solve this is just referencing Mission of the Messiah, because the idea of the resurrection body, and remember what they mean by resurrection body, right? Remember what they mean by physical resurrection. It's a glorified body that all believers will inherit in the last days, right? But that is predicated on Christ resurrecting, right? And that means that, Christ had to die, right? Does that make sense? If his original mission was to die, then yes, he's resurrected with the resurrection body that all believers will inherit, But if we say that, Christ was not supposed to die in the first place, that was not his primary mission, the resurrection was not really supposed to happen, then this whole problem disappears, right? If we reference Mission of the Messiah, this whole notion of, eschatology and our study of the last days, saying that all believers will be raised just like Jesus was raised, physical resurrection body, that whole problem disappears, right? Does that make sense? I hope I'm getting through. Some people seem confused. And I'm looking at one specific person. But that problem disappears, right? Because that was not the providential route that was supposed to happen. And that resurrection, quote unquote, resurrection body, because it's heavily linked with the last days, right? That is not supposed to happen, right? So that means that the physical resurrection that they are talking about, all believers will inherit in the last days, right? That is not true. Does that make sense? We can also do this with, referencing ideal of creation, right? That is the original world that we're trying to strive towards, right? We can also do it with that. But personally, I just like Mission of the Messiah a lot, so that's why I kind of connected with that. But you can also argue this same principle with ideal of creation, saying that, in the Garden of Eden, when humanity had no sin, there was no resurrection body that we're trying to go towards, right? The ideal of creation was that, heaven and earth work together, right? And, that Adam and Eve were still physical beings, right? They're not transcendent beings, like being able to teleport and things like that, and they get this when Jesus is appearing to them randomly in a locked room, right? And they quote verses like Jesus in Luke 24 that says that Jesus appeared amongst them, right? And said that basically, touch me to basically confirm that I'm not a spirit, right? First of all, spirit and spiritual is very different and we have to understand the context in which Jesus appeared. He appeared, right? Because they were in a locked room, right? As John 20 references. Luke doesn't mention that, but John, in a parallel account, right? It's a parallel account, and he mentions it. So they were in a locked room. They're just weeping because the guy that they thought was the Messiah is now dead, right? That's the situation that is taking place, sorry. That is a situation that is taking place where they're all grieving, they're heartbroken, now 11, right, not 12, that the Messiah is killed, right? And suddenly, just a guy appears in the middle of nowhere in a locked room, right? They're surprised. They're like, what is going on, right? So they think it's a ghost or something like that can materialize right away, right? So that's why they are frightened and scared, right? That is the exact quote in Luke. And that is the context behind Jesus assuring them that, it's really me. It's really me. And we see that spiritual entities can interact with physical things, right? Angel at Sodom and Gomorrah, Jacob wrestling the angel, other examples, right? There's many other examples. So, yeah, we have to get the whole context of which Jesus appeared. And also Paul, right, in the road to Damascus, he sees the risen Jesus. But his companions who are with him don't see the risen Jesus. They only hear a voice, right? So that also indicates what we believe as spiritual resurrection. It's not some ghost, what we define as spiritual resurrection, right? So that also indicates that, right? Because the other people, it literally says that, they could not see Jesus, but they could hear his voice, right? But only Paul saw the risen Christ. So we have to get the entire context of what Luke 24 is talking about. Christ appearing in the middle of nowhere. He's literally just manifesting into existence, right? In a locked room where all the disciples are heartbroken that the guy that they've been following for 3.5 years is now dead. They thought that he was going to be the Messiah, right? So we need to get the entire context of that. But, I think we can really just solve this really fast in saying that, Mission of the Messiah, that was not the original route, right? The body that all believers will inherit, that is not the original route, or that is not the ideal of creation that was supposed to happen, right? And therefore, if Christ had another primary desire, then this whole resurrection body debate kind of disappears automatically. Does that kind of make sense? Yes. Okay. Yes. Ms. Gary, do you have a question? We are kind of running out of time. I was notified last time that... I think so, yes. Why? Well, don't we have to do the choir? You said that no choir today. Okay. Oh, Pennsylvania turn. Okay.
It's just, well, okay.
Oh, I just want to say that I don't know everything. Yes.
Well,
I just want to clarify. Yes.
Neither do I. So I guess I'm trying to understand what you're saying. You're saying because it wasn't the original mission of Jesus to go to the cross, then the whole question of the resurrection body is solved because...
Yes, because it is predicated on Christ dying and resurrecting, right? And it's very tied to the last days.
Right.
Yes.
However, he did go to the cross and he did reappear, and so the question of the nature of that body is still a question. Is what you're saying that the glorified body is equivalent to Jesus' spiritual body? Is that what you? Are you saying the two are synonymous then?
No. We don't believe in the Christian concept or the majority of what they say of physical resurrection. It's not synonymous at all.
No, but could you not? Does glorified body have to be physical? Can't we say glorified body is a spiritual body?
Yeah, but what they mean by glorified body, and this is a discussion that I had with someone for a long time. We went back and forth. This is the exact question, right? But if we understand what they mean by glorified body and its heavy ties to the last days, then we have to reject that, right?
Okay.
Yes.
I guess, all right, now I understand what you're saying.
Yes.
I guess, but what the question that came to my mind was, because Jesus is from the God of night,
Yes.
then I think it'd be interesting to pray about, understand, study the nature of his spiritual body.
Mm-hmm.
I know he said we would all have those bodies, but the fact that he is the one who is from the God of night,
Mm-hmm.
maybe there's something very special and very different about his spiritual body.
Yes, for sure, right? He is.
And
yeah.
secondly, I think that's one thing I think to consider. And the second thing to consider is the spiritual, the physiological, metaphysical energy of those who have accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior. If the nature of their spiritual bodies, we would not call it glorified body because of its ties to the last days. But at the same time, that we can talk about, is there some difference in the essence of spiritual, of being like divine spirit, life spirit, form spirit? That I think that is discussion worth having at some point from a principled perspective.
Yeah, and that really ties into the resurrection lecture, right?
Yes, it does. It does.
Yes, how the resurrection of the dead, and we have to kind of separate the event of Jesus' resurrection and the
Right.
principle of resurrection.
Right.
'Cause they're very different.
But there are ties, because we're talking
Yes,
about
yes, definitely,
what
yes.
kind of body.
Yes.
So there's a form spirit, there's a life spirit, and a divine spirit. Well, the principle teaches that. Well, that means something
Yes.
in terms of the nature of the spiritual body. So it's just an interesting difference in terminology, but one worth comparing at some point.
Yes, and yeah, that's a good point. And we need to do more thinking regarding this, right? I think what's also might be helpful is, we have this debate on physical and spiritual resurrection, but we also, in regards to the event of the resurrection, right? But we also have this entire principle of resurrection, right?
Right.
This concept of resurrection is different than the
Right.
event of the resurrection.
Right.
So I think it would be better if we actually, kind of rephrase the spiritual versus physical resurrection versus the concept of resurrection, which is totally different.
Yeah.
Right. I think that'll also be helpful in this discussion. But yes, it goes into a lot more depth. The resurrection lecture regarding the resurrection of the dead. What is it? The form, life, and divine spirits. Right.
Right.
But yes.
It's especially a sensitive topic for Christianity because that is one of the pillars that many theologians use to prove the divinity of Christ. to prove the messiahship of Christ, the fact that he resurrected.
Yes,
So
yes,
it's
yes.
kind of like, oh no, you're throwing away my whole.
No.
You know what I mean? I think, but
Yeah, no. And it's especially the mission of Jesus too, the cross too.
yeah,
Because that's why I think it's better to kind of argue from the mission of the Messiah standpoint instead of the ideal of creation standpoint.
I agree.
Because the ideal of creation, yes, you can really establish it, but it's not already, there's not a lot of biblical material to work with.
We have
right?
Genesis 1:28. Okay, that's
No.
pretty much it's one passage kind of.
No,
But
not
listen-
only one passage, it's the entire, the first two chapters, Genesis
yeah,
as a
you're right,
whole,
you're
right?
right.
But and Genesis chapter 3, but
You're right.
there's a lot more material to work with Jesus' resurrection. So that's why I kind of come from that point of view. But yes, you can, if you can establish ideal of creation beforehand, then that's a good angle to go. But I think that's why I kind of emphasize the mission of the Messiah to go to, this debate of spiritual versus physical resurrection. And, majority of Christianity, right, doesn't know what they mean by physical resurrection, right? They just think it's resuscitation, right? And it's very different, right? It's very different what they're claiming in physical resurrection,
Yeah.
right? It's literally the body that all believers will inherit in the last days.
Right.
Yes. And yeah, so that's why we can't really, accept that, because that, first of all, that's not biblical. And second of all, that's not a principle, right?
By physical, do they just mean tangible?
That's what is believed by many, right? But what they actually mean, what their doctrines kind of actually mean is that, it's tangible, yes, but it's a glorified body that like literally can teleport, appear out of spaces. They cite like verses like Jesus appearing, right? That all believers will inherit in the new heavens and the new earth, right? When Christ comes and raises everyone from the dead, right? Yes.
What's so beautiful about coming from the mission of the Messiah? It's such a strong biblical case, and then it enables you to connect all the other points.
Yes. No, it has such. Yeah.
It all connects. It connects to the ideal of creation.
Right.
It connects to resurrection. It
Yeah.
connects to everything.
No, like it literally connects everything, right? Even second coming, it has massive implications. And I think this is really the bridging point, right? That's why, like, majority of my videos are mission of the Messiah, because it's like the implications are huge, right? Ideal of creation, fall of man, restoration, obviously second coming, right? So this is like the hill we have to die on, right? And it's just so much more biblical, right? It's just so much more biblical. Reflects, what Jesus' true heart is, right? Garden of Gethsemane, weeping over Jerusalem. That's my favorite reason among the 27 reasons. Like Jesus weeping over Jerusalem, because you can't get around that. Like there's no possible way for you to kind of circumvent that in saying that Jesus did not actually desire. Jesus did not. There was no other path other than the cross, right? There's no way to kind of dodge that, right? It's just so clear, and it's just so much more biblical too. And yeah, I think this is really our connecting point, and it has incredible implications for the second coming, but also all other doctrines. Principle of creation, obviously, fall, restoration, resurrection too. The not event of the resurrection, concept of resurrection. Yes, but just going back to this, like we kind of do need to rephrase physical versus spiritual resurrection, because that's completely different than our concept of resurrection, what we're talking about, right? Our principle of resurrection, right? So yes, that needs to be talked about. Definitely not. We should not rephrase that as reincarnation. That definitely, no, we should not do that. Okay, that has heavy Eastern connotations, right? But something along those lines, yes. But yes. We are way overboard. We are 48, so we need to end. But yes, could I ask? Dejo, you want to pray? Sure. Okay, you raised your hand. So okay. Yes.
Okay. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for this time that we have to be able to study your word and to be able to converse in this way so that we can better get to a clear, concise conclusion of your heart and your will, and that we are just wanting and desiring to be used for that. And we're just so grateful that we could be able to have this time with each other. and with Shin Joon being able to allow you to speak through him so that we can understand you better. And yeah, we just want to offer this time to you in Jesus' name, through generational kingship line in our names, Dejo and Emerald, Garrett, Central Blessed family, Aju.
Thank you.